At Langford Industries, a towering tech firm known for its innovation and fierce internal competition, most employees were too busy to notice the people behind the scenes, the ones who polished the floors, emptied the trash, or cleaned the offices at dawn. One of them was Elena. Every morning before sunrise, she would sweep through the building with quiet precision. With her dark uniform, gentle smile, and calm presence, most people passed her by as if she was part of the wallpaper. She was just the janitor, and no one cared to learn her name. She never interrupted conversations. Never lingered. Never looked anyone in the eye longer than a second. But if anyone had bothered to look, really look, they might have seen the way her eyes followed the company's multilingual meetings with understanding, or the way she paused when passing language scripts left on whiteboards. But no one noticed. Not until the day of the international delegation meeting. That morning, the building buzzed with nervous energy. The CEO, Mr. Barrett Langford himself, was preparing to host a panel of international investors, people from across Europe, Asia, and Africa. The top managers were on edge. Everything had to be perfect. And that's when disaster struck. The grand conference room on the 30th floor was set. Dozens of flags lined the walls. The long glass table shimmered under the spotlights. Bottles of imported water, screens for presentations, and notepads in 5 languages were laid out. But there was a problem. "Where's the translator?" barked Mr. Langford's assistant, eyes wide as she checked her phone again. He confirmed this morning. A wave of panic rippled through the staff. The professional interpreter, fluent in multiple languages, was stuck at the airport due to a massive storm. No flights. No way to get a replacement in time. "We'll lose the deal if we can't communicate clearly," one of the executives whispered. "This is a $90 million partnership." The CEO, tall and sharp in a blue suit, rubbed his temples. "Great. We're hosting some of the most powerful investors in the world and we can't even greet them properly." The tension was thick. People scrambled, dialing translation agencies, fumbling with language apps, nothing was working. That's when a quiet voice spoke from the corner of the room. "If you'll allow me, I can help." Everyone turned. It was Elena. The janitor. Mop in hand. Hair tied back. Standing near the coffee station. At first, no one said a word. A few even laughed under their breath. "Help," said one executive. "With what?" "Cleaning the stress off the walls." But Elena didn't flinch. She gently put the mop aside and repeated, "I speak their languages." All of them. The room froze. Silence stretched across the room like a taut wire. Mr. Langford blinked. "You speak their languages?" "Which ones, exactly?" Elena stood calmly, hands clasped. "French. German. Mandarin. Japanese. Arabic. Russian. Portuguese. Italian. And Swahili." The assistant scoffed. 9 languages? That's ridiculous." But Mr. Langford didn't laugh. His eyes narrowed, calculating. He turned to one of the investors, an older gentleman from Paris. "Go ahead. Ask her something," the CEO said in a low tone. The Frenchman leaned forward, smirking, and asked in rapid French, "Do you really understand me, or are you just pretending to impress the boss?" Without pause, Elena responded fluently and elegantly in French, "Sir, if I were pretending, I wouldn't have just complimented your choice of cologne in perfect grammar." The man blinked, stunned. The others murmured. Then a German executive chimed in. "Und was ist mit Deutsch?" Elena smiled and shifted seamlessly into German, Naderlich. "Ich have 3 Jar in Berlin Gillette." The Japanese investor gasped as Elena greeted her with flawless pronunciation, and the Arabic delegate's eyes widened when she recited a proverb from his homeland, one his own father used to say. The room was no longer full of doubt. It was filled with awe. Mr. Langford slowly leaned back in his chair, eyes never leaving Elena. "Where did you learn all this?" She replied softly, "Life teaches you a lot when people think you're invisible." The energy in the room had completely shifted. Gone were the looks of dismissal and quiet snickers. Now, the executives and delegates alike were leaning in, hanging on to Elena's every word as she effortlessly translated back and forth across multiple languages, switching tones, adapting dialects, and even catching subtle cultural cues the original interpreter might have missed. She wasn't just translating. She was connecting. The French investor whispered to the German delegate, "She's better than our usual translators." "She's better than all of them," the German replied. Mr. Langford sat still, studying her. He wasn't a man easily surprised. But this was extraordinary. After the meeting wrapped, successfully and even ahead of schedule thanks to Elena's fluid coordination, Mr. Langford motioned her to stay behind. Everyone else filtered out, murmuring praise and exchanging glances filled with newfound respect. Once the room was empty, Langford stood and walked toward her. "You've been here how long?" he asked. 2 years, Elena answered. "And no one knew what you could do?" She shrugged. "No one ever asked." Mr. Langford nodded slowly. "That ends today." The next morning, the entire building buzzed with whispers. "Did you hear what happened yesterday? The janitor?" "No way." She spoke 9 languages in front of the CEO. The investors were blown away. By noon, Elena's name was on everyone's lips, and this time, not as a rumor or background face. Her story spread like wildfire across the company Slack, then into industry forums. But the biggest surprise came later that afternoon. An email was sent to all Langford Industries employees with the subject line, "New role appointment, multilingual liaison cultural intelligence officer." Beneath it, a photo of Elena. Hair tied neatly, eyes focused, and her name in bold letters. People were stunned. Not because she didn't deserve it, but because they never saw it coming. She had always been there, sweeping quietly past their desks, holding a mind more brilliant than half the boardroom. When Elena stepped off the elevator on the 30th floor that day, no mop in sight, every head turned. This time, they looked at her with curiosity, respect, even admiration. Mr. Langford greeted her with a firm handshake. "Your office is ready," he said. She smiled. "I appreciate the opportunity." "No," he said sincerely. "We're the ones who should be thanking you, for reminding us that titles don't define talent." And with that, Elena took her first steps into a role she'd been born to fill. Elena's promotion sent shockwaves throughout the company. For weeks, employees walked a little differently, more aware, more curious. People began learning the names of the cafeteria staff. They greeted the overnight cleaners with smiles. Conversations that once ended in awkward silence now turned into moments of genuine connection. But the change didn't stop at Langford Industries. Tech blogs picked up Elena's story. Then major business outlets. Headlines read, "Janitor turned executive, the woman who spoke 9 languages and changed a corporation. Hidden genius in plain sight, how one woman's quiet talent rocked a multimillion-dollar deal." One morning, Elena was invited to speak at a business leadership summit. She stepped onto the stage in front of hundreds of CEOs and industry giants, not as a guest, but as the keynote speaker. Her message was simple: talent has no uniform. Potential has no rank. And dignity? That should never be earned, it should always be given. The room gave her a standing ovation. Back at Langford, the CEO introduced a new internal policy, the Elena Standard, a company-wide initiative to actively seek, support, and uplift hidden talent at every level. It wasn't just about PR. It became part of the company's DNA. All because one woman, once ignored, dismissed, and invisible, chose to speak. Months passed, and Elena settled into her new role seamlessly. She traveled internationally with Mr. Langford, not as support staff, but as his trusted advisor, bridging cultures, decoding nuances, and catching miscommunications before they happened. She saved deals. She opened doors. She made people feel heard. But one day, something unexpected happened. While reviewing contracts in her sleek glass office, she heard a knock at the door. Standing there was a young man in a gray uniform, nervously gripping a mop, just like she used to. Hi, he said. Sorry, I'm the new evening janitor. I wanted to say, thank you. Elena blinked. For what? He stepped inside, hesitant. I read your story. I used to think people like us just stay in the background. But now, I'm learning English and Korean. I want to be more. You made me believe it's possible. She smiled softly, rising from her chair. What's your name? Marco. Marco, she said, walking over to shake his hand, when you're ready, come find me. We'll make sure you're seen. He beamed, and for the first time, stood a little taller. That evening, Elena sat by the window of her office, looking out over the city lights. She thought about her first day at Langford, how she used to mop this very floor. How invisible she once felt. Now, she was a light for others, proof that being underestimated is sometimes the greatest gift. It gives you the element of surprise. That night, long after the building had emptied, Mr. Langford remained in his office. He sat at his desk, reviewing quarterly reports, but his mind kept drifting, back to the day Elena first spoke up. Back to the shocked faces. Back to his own surprise, which had quickly turned into admiration. He stood and walked over to the large window overlooking the city, phone in hand. With a few swipes, he pulled up the internal employee database. He filtered by department, maintenance, security, cafeteria. Dozens of names appeared. People had walked past 100 times. He scrolled for a while, reading job titles, wondering how many more Elenas were waiting. The next morning, he called an emergency meeting, not with his board, not with investors, but with every floor supervisor, department head, and HR officer. He stood at the front of the auditorium. I want every department, he said firmly, to spend the next month identifying untapped potential. I want to know who's been overlooked. I don't care what uniform they wear. I care what they know, what they dream, and what they can become. A few looked confused. Others inspired. One executive raised her hand. Are we starting a new mentorship program? Langford shook his head. No. We're starting a culture shift. And it starts now. Later that day, Elena was invited to join the leadership board, not just as a translator or advisor, but as a director. Her voice would now help shape the very future of Langford Industries. She didn't climb the ladder. She redefined it. Elena's new title, Director of Global Communication and Cultural Development, sent another ripple through the business world. But inside Langford Industries, it meant something even more profound. It wasn't just a promotion. It was a statement. The woman who once scrubbed scuff marks off marble floors was now walking the halls with purpose, speaking at executive summits, mentoring interns, and building bridges between cultures, departments, and perspectives. Her first official move in her new role. She launched an initiative called the Hidden Voices Project, a company-wide program designed to uncover skills and passions among employees often overlooked by traditional hiring systems. Janitors with coding experience. Cafeteria workers with marketing degrees. Security guards fluent in 3 languages. Within weeks, dozens of stories poured in. A night janitor named Omar had a degree in economics but had been unable to get corporate interviews due to gaps in his resume. Elena brought him into a finance rotation program. A front desk receptionist named Talia turned out to be a gifted UX designer in her free time. Elena introduced her to the app development team, where she quickly became a rising star. Even Mr. Langford, who prided himself on knowing every corner of his company, was stunned by what they'd been missing. One day, he walked into a staff town hall, invited by Elena herself. She stood at the front, holding a microphone, with a slideshow behind her full of employee stories, people who had risen not because someone gave them permission, but because someone finally saw them. She paused, then looked directly at Langford. "You said once that titles don't define talent," she said to him. "I'd like to go one step further, opportunity reveals it. But only if we're willing to look in places we've ignored for too long." The room erupted in applause. Langford stepped forward, taking the mic. "I hired Elena to clean our building," he said. "Turns out, she's cleaning our vision too." That line went viral on the company's social page, and then spread far beyond. Business schools began using Langford Industries as a case study in progressive leadership. Elena was asked to speak at TED. Companies began copying the Hidden Voices model. And still, every Friday afternoon, she made time to visit the people in the break room, those still in uniforms, still often passed by. She didn't walk in like a boss. She walked in like someone who understood. She'd been there. And she never forgot. It had been exactly 1 year since Elena stood in the corner of that conference room, mop in hand, and quietly offered to help. Now, her name was engraved on a plaque just outside the executive wing, right below the inscription, "Talent lives everywhere. So must our respect." Langford Industries had transformed, not just structurally, but soul deep. Once a typical corporate giant, it had become a global symbol of inclusivity, humility, and brilliance in unlikely places. Job applications poured in, not just from Ivy League grads, but from people across the world who had once been told they were too late, too different, or not polished enough. And it wasn't just talk. Numbers backed it up. Retention skyrocketed. Profits grew. International partnerships became smoother and more meaningful. More than that, the culture was alive. People smiled more. Spoke up more. Doors weren't just open, they were being held open. And in the center of it all was Elena. But she never made it about her. Even as her inbox filled with speaking requests, interviews, offers from Fortune 500 companies, she remained grounded. She'd say, "I'm not the story. I'm just the reminder that stories like mine shouldn't be rare." Her final project before stepping into an even broader international role was something she called Legacy in Motion. It wasn't a building or a campaign. It was a scholarship, for overlooked workers within the company to pursue education, mentorship, and leadership training. But there was one rule: applicants had to nominate someone else. The idea spread like wildfire. Security guards nominated cafeteria workers. Janitors nominated mailroom clerks. Some managers were nominated by entry-level staff who felt seen for the first time. One nomination letter read, "He stayed late for 5 years and helped me with English every week. He never asked for anything in return. I think it's his time." When Elena read that letter, she cried. It was proof that the culture she'd helped spark wasn't dependent on her, it was alive and spreading on its own. Her last day at the headquarters was quiet by design. She didn't want speeches or parties. Instead, she left handwritten notes for the cleaning staff, the reception team, and every person who had ever told her, "You inspire me." In the elevator down, she stood next to a new intern who didn't recognize her. The intern sighed nervously and said, "First day. I hope I don't mess it up." Elena smiled and replied, "Just be yourself. And listen more than you speak. You never know who's standing next to you." When she walked out of the building, no cameras followed her. No press. Just a quiet confidence. Because she knew, she had already made history. Not by demanding power, but by revealing the power that already lived within her, and showing the world what happens when someone finally listens. 2 years later. A young girl sat nervously in the back of a crowded auditorium in Nairobi, Kenya. Her name was Amina, a soft-spoken high school student whose parents worked long hours, her mother as a cleaner in a hospital, her father as a night security guard. On stage, the room buzzed in anticipation. Cameras flashed. International press filled the aisles. The speaker they had come to see was running late, delayed by a flight diversion due to a storm over the Mediterranean. Just as the host began to apologize, the side door opened quietly. Elena walked in. No grand entrance. No entourage. Just a calm presence, a small smile, and a worn leather notebook tucked under her arm. The applause was thunderous. She waited for it to quiet, then walked up to the podium, took a deep breath, and spoke, not in English, but in fluent Swahili. Before I speak to you about leadership, I want to speak to the people in this room who feel unseen, unheard, and underestimated. Her voice echoed through the crowd, reaching not just ears, but hearts. She told them the story, how she had once cleaned windows in silence, how no one had learned her name, how no one had asked what she knew, until one day, they did. And the world changed. Elena had now spoken in over 60 countries. She was working with the United Nations on global communication programs for underserved communities. The Hidden Voices Project had grown into a global nonprofit with satellite hubs in 18 countries, helping tens of thousands of workers find pathways into education, leadership, and entrepreneurship. But she never took credit for it. In interviews, she always said, "It wasn't about me. It was about what people stopped to notice when they finally looked beyond job titles." In the Nairobi auditorium, as she spoke, Amina clutched a letter in her lap, a letter she hadn't dared send. It was addressed to Elena. Dear Ms. Elena, my mother is a janitor. She speaks 3 languages. I want to be like her, and like you. I just wanted you to know. After the speech, something unbelievable happened. Elena walked into the crowd, greeting people one by one. And somehow, in the sea of hands, she found Amina. You remind me of someone, Elena said softly. Amina froze. Who? My younger self. Tears welled in the girl's eyes. Elena handed her the notebook she'd carried for years, the same one she used to scribble translations in during late-night shifts. The corners were bent. Pages filled with foreign alphabets, goals, quotes, and dreams. I want you to have this, she said. Amina shook her head. I can't, this is yours. Elena smiled. Not anymore. It's part of something bigger now. So are you. That moment became a photo. Then a symbol. And later, when Amina was accepted into a university scholarship funded by the Hidden Voices Foundation, she framed the first page of that notebook. It read, One day, someone will see me. One day, I will help them see others. Elena never sought fame. She didn't need it. Her legacy wasn't built on noise, it was built on presence. On compassion. On the power of noticing. And the world? It would never again look at a janitor, a security guard, or a cafeteria worker the same way. Because once someone speaks 9 languages in a room that never saw them coming, the rules are rewritten forever. 5 years later. A new documentary premiered on global streaming platforms. Its title? Invisible No More, the Elena Mendez story. It opened with grainy security footage, Elena standing in the corner of the Langford Industries boardroom, mop in hand, as executives rushed around in panic. Then, her voice, calmly saying, I speak their languages. All of them. That moment, captured unintentionally, became iconic. It symbolized the exact instant the world started to change. Not because of power, but because of truth. A truth everyone had ignored for too long: brilliance doesn't always wear a suit. The film followed her journey across continents, Elena in villages, schools, factories, and offices. Translating not just language, but dignity. The Hidden Voices Foundation had now helped over 120,000 people find educational opportunities, mentorships, and leadership roles. It had partnered with major universities, created curriculum for recognizing overlooked talent, and inspired a wave of corporate introspection. But even with all the accolades, Elena remained herself. She still rode public transit when she could. Still answered her own emails. Still walked into janitor closets in every new office building and left a handwritten note, "I was once here. I see you. Don't let anyone shrink your worth." Elena. The final scene of the documentary showed Elena sitting under a tree in her hometown, speaking with a group of schoolchildren. One girl asked, "How did you become famous?" Elena chuckled. "I didn't. I just stopped hiding." Another boy leaned forward. "Do you think we can do what you did?" She looked at them, eyes soft and steady. "If you speak from your heart, yes. If you stand tall even when no one's watching, especially then, yes. But more importantly," she paused, "I hope you never wait for permission to be great." The screen faded to black. And then the final words appeared, "Sometimes the world needs to be reminded, you don't need a title to have a voice. You just need the courage to use it."